This is a press photo from 1940, and it's showing a protest out in front of the wall of the Grand Palace in Bangkok, Thailand, which had just become Thailand. They changed their name to that from Siam just within a couple of years in 1940, or even in 1940. So what this is showing is, and you have perhaps seen this place if you've been to Thailand, because it looks a lot the same now. That wall, that white wall, looks just like that. Grand Palace is behind it. It's a big tourist attraction. And across this street, I don't know the name of the street, is a museum now. And probably then too. And these cannons they have a big collection of cannons going back to the 1500s, which they originally got the first ones from the Portuguese. And then after that, I'm sure they got them from other European powers over the years as Thailand went along trying to modernize and keep up. The Portuguese were pretty much the first Europeans to show up in numbers in Siam in the 1500s, though. And that's because, of course, the Portuguese went around Africa. They didn't go over the Atlantic and come across the Pacific. They went around Africa and then showed up in the Indian Ocean, and then started showing up in India, and then went around the bottom of India and made their way ultimately to the islands, Indonesia, Malacca, Straits of Malacca, and on the way they made it to Siam. So anyway, that's why they have these big old-fashioned looking cannons. This is not 1940s Thailand military hardware, but they are still there lined up in a field across from the Grand Palace, even now, as sort of a monument or museum piece. But these signs here, which of course I can't read because I don't know how to read Thai, we have some information on the back. This is an original photo. It is not a copy, and it comes with the notes of the journalist who took the picture, and then this ran in maybe the Associated Press or was sold to different syndicated newspapers at the time. There's some information you can see here. Probably that's New York City something Inc. But let's see what it says. This is interesting. Demonstrations and riots. Thailanders demonstrate against Indochina. Bangkok, Thailand, Siam. Indochina at the moment, keep in mind, at this moment, is France. Indochina is the French colonies just to the east of the border of Thailand. And just like you're hearing about on the news recently with Cambodia and Thailand having some arguments and shelling back and forth over a disputed border between Cambodia and Thailand, that comes from this, because Cambodia was part of Indochina at that time, as was Laos and Vietnam. They were all Indochina. So they're demonstrating against Indochina. And it further tells us here, when Japan, new Axis partner, put the pressure on French authorities in Indochina, Little Thailand, Siam, added to the complications with demonstrations for the return of former Thailand territory from Indochina, perhaps even including that little bit that they're arguing today with Cambodia about. But mostly I think this has to do with Laos, because in the 1800s, up until about the 1870s, what we now call Laos, a lot of it was owned by or controlled by the Kingdom of Siam. But then the French in the 1870s, I believe, under Emperor Napoleon III, sent gunboats up the Chao Phraya River, which is that river that goes through Bangkok, up by the Grand Palace on the river, menacing it. I don't think any shots were fired. I could be wrong. There might have been some. Anyway, putting that aside, there didn't end up being a big war. Basically, King Rama V, Chulalongkorn, cut a deal with the French and said, okay, how about we don't have a fight? We'll give you what today we call Laos and sort of protection money. So you take that and then you go away. Here's my wallet. So that's what happened. And I give a lot of credit to King V, Chulalongkorn, and the people around him, because sometimes it's smart to do that. everyone was trying to pick a fight with Thailand, especially the French, because it was the only non-colonized country in the area, with the exception of Japan. But Thailand was sort of a buffer between the English colonies over in Burma, Bangladesh, and India on the left, the west, and then on the right, everything was French. And on the bottom, everything was also British and then Dutch. You know, the British had Malaysia and Singapore, and then the Dutch had Indonesia. So, and the U.S. owned the Philippines by the end of the 1800s. Spain had it until then. So they're surrounded by colonial powers, and the French were just looking for an excuse, you know, what do they call it, a casus belli, which the English had done with Burma, sort of shady provocations to get the Burmese to fight them in 3 Anglo-Burmese wars in the 1800s, which resulted in Burma being totally colonized by the English. So that's what I think this territorial dispute and these demonstrations are about, is that the Siamese Thai people are saying, hey, and my wife, who looked at what the signs say, told me that essentially they say, time for war with France or something like that, or we want war. So they want the return of former Thailand territory from Indochina. Here's a general scene during a manifestation by members of youth and girls organizations before the Thailand Defense Ministry here. The Thailand Defense Ministry is what I was talking about, that has those cannons and what I think now is sort of a museum. The modern loudspeakers background contrasts strangely with the ancient ornamental cannon. And you know, the loudspeakers are a feature of the 1940s. Hitler famously was an early adopter of that technology to get mass coordination at rallies and things like that. So here it's going on here, and Thailand almost was designated an Axis power and punished along with Japan and the other Axis powers at the end of World War II, because England and France in particular, especially, this ended up erupting into a war. So this says November 16th, 1940. And shortly after this, Thailand did invade Laos, Cambodia, against the French. And there was a war. It's called the franco-thai war. And there was airplane fights and some small tank battles. And the French were, of course, pretty hamstrung, because by November 16th, 1940, when just those demonstrations before the invasion happened, France itself has already fallen. You know, so you got Vichy French running the show, and the Nazis. And so this colony is a little bit detached. And then the Japanese were coming in. The Japanese ended up taking all of that away. And they actually brokered a deal and pretty much told Thailand, look, back off. And ultimately Japan occupied Thailand too, but treated Thailand, compared to every other place they occupied, the best. And for that reason, I think it's P-Boon was the prime minister of Thailand at that time, pretty much cooperated with the Japanese, but there was an underground resistance movement that sprang up, and the people behind that ended up founding what's now Thammasat University, which is in the same neighborhood as this Grand Palace here. You know, if you go walk around the whole circuit of this wall, on one part of it, you'll go through or close to the Thammasat University campus. And so those guys founded that university. And interestingly, the other famous top university in Thailand is Chulalongkorn, named after King Chulalongkorn, King V. So this is an interesting picture. It's interesting that it's kids and youth groups and girls who are out here. They're not anti-war protesters. They're war protesters, and they got their war. And by most accounts, even though it was a relatively small war, Thailand won. And it was sort of seen as a little bit of revenge for what happened in the 1870s when they had to give that land to France. In the end, as we all know, Thailand just went back to its regular boundaries anyway. It didn't get to keep Laos, but we are today dealing still with the repercussions of the dispute over that border with Cambodia, and it's just a little piece of the border. that they can't agree on. As just in 2025, they're still trading some shells, and the worst part of all, the biggest casualty, is a Thai 7-Eleven got hit. So it makes me really hard to forgive the Cambodians for that one. Anyway, nice picture.